Hey there guys, so yeah, let's talk about another one of the fights that happened on the Saudi Arabia card this last weekend between Martin Bakole and Jared Anderson. Um, so yeah, like many other people in the boxing community, I was surprised that Jared Anderson's team had actually taken the Martin Bakole fight. Obviously, we've heard a long time about Martin Bakole. Um, he's being ducked in the heavyweight division. No one wants to fight him because he's sort of high risk, low reward, one of those guys. And yeah, Jared Anderson going into this fight, I believe he was 17-0. But he hadn't really fought anyone. He was just fighting guys who were coming in and laying down for him. And the only real fight of any that was in any way competitive was probably the Charles Martin fight. And Charles Martin's someone who got knocked out by AJ in 2 rounds, lost to Kovnatsky, got knocked out by geriatric Luis Ortiz, and then he fought Riyad Merry, who's a cruiserweight. The guy just wasn't there to win; he was just there to survive. Went 10 rounds, but he really didn't put any resistance up at all. So this was like a huge leap in class. He was going from Charles Martin to Martin Bakole, and I just thought they would have taken an easier fight. At this stage of Jared Anderson's career, I thought. Being top rank, I thought they might have tried to put him in with F.A. Ajagba, on a top rank show, but yeah, they threw him into this fight, threw him into the deep end. And the only concern I had about this fight, I always thought Martin Bakole would have too much for Jared Anderson, but the only concern was, whether this was like a showcase fight for Jared Anderson, similar to the Diego Corrales fight for Floyd Mayweather, whether they were bringing in Martin Bakole just to make Jared Anderson look good. Jay Prince was going to pull the strings. Bakole wasn't going to be Bakole in that ring. If you know what I mean. And I was very wary about whether Bakole was actually going to just come for the payday. But no, he actually came into the ring. He really put up a good fight. Obviously, in the first round, he was pretty much like a punching bag, just getting beaten up. But then turned it on, knocked Jared Anderson down. And I don't even think the fight was... It was competitive in spells, don't get me wrong. I mean, Jared Anderson did land a lot of shots. But, he didn't really phase Bakole with any of them. He was landing some good body shots, some good head shots, but... every time Bakole would land a shot, it would hurt Jared Anderson visibly. You push him back to the ropes, unload on him. And I didn't think Jared Anderson won a round. I thought, he showed heart. He showed that, he had grit, but he was definitely overmatched. Bakole just had way too much for him. A fight like this, it's not so much about who's the better technically. When you fight someone like Bakole, who's so big and who's just gonna press you all night, gonna throw those really hard shots. Similar to a fight like Miguel Cotto versus Antonio Margarito, you need to be able to keep this guy off. You need to have some pop, just to hurt him, just to dissuade him from coming in, make him think about throwing those big shots, make him think about pressuring. And I just didn't really think Jared Anderson would be able to do it. Jared Anderson, he isn't the biggest puncher in the world. He has shown some power, but I mean, the guys in his career who have been there to put up some resistance. I mean, Charles Martin went the distance, and he went the distance with Riyad Merry, who's a cruiserweight. So Jared Anderson hasn't got any real heavyweight power at he's not Zhilei Zhang, put it that way. And I thought this fight would be similar to the Tony Yoka fight, where Jared Anderson would try and run a bit, try and just, sort of pot shot from the outside, just get on his bike and keep moving. But I don't really think Jared Anderson came into the fight with a very good game plan. Unless he thought he was going to blow out Bakole in 2 rounds, just stand there and just try and land right hands and try and get him out of there. I thought he came in with a poor game plan. And yeah, ended up getting dropped 3 times, knocked out in the 5th round. And I thought Bakole won every round, just based on how he was hurting Jared Anderson. A lot of people thought he won the 3rd, but You know, I know Anderson landed like a high volume of shots, but I just thought Bakole landed the more damaging shots. And you know, this could be Martin Bakole's sort of come out fight in the heavyweight division. He's had some good wins in the past. You know, he beat Tony Oka, who was quite. I know a lot of people see Tony Oka as like a bum these days, just because he's lost 3 fights in a row, I believe. But you know, it was a pretty good win at the time. I believe Tony Oka was gonna fight Hrgovic in an eliminator, but he signed to fight Bakole, so he had to go through with the contract. It was something like that. And I think he beat Sergey Kuzmin on points. You know, most people going into this fight probably remembered Bakole from the Michael Hunter fight. And I think he's really improved from that fight. I think there was something wrong with him in that fight. I know he injured one of his shoulders in the later rounds, but you know, I just don't think he was really all there that night. He just didn't seem to be really putting on that pressure, really letting his hands go. And Michael Hunter was able to beat him. If they had a rematch now, you know, Bakole's so much heavier, so much more experienced. And I just think he'd be in better shape going into that fight. I think he'd probably knock Michael Hunter out, you know, probably within 6 rounds. You know, just because Hunter's probably regressed at this point as well. And I think, you know, this being on the Saudi Arabia cards, you know, they always say about Saudi, if you impress, you'll be back on the next show. I hope, you know, Martin Bakole actually gets some decent fights of consequence now. I've always been somewhat impressed with him. You know, he's not like the best technically. You know, he gets hit a lot. You could argue that he has no defense. You know, he got pieced up in this fight, but again, he's so hard to hurt. He's so big. He hits so hard. You know, his pressure is relentless. And I just think he's going to be a problem for everyone in the heavyweight division. I don't think he'll beat everyone. I probably think guys like Tyson Fury and Usyk would have too much for him, but I think he'd give them tough fights. I think the Joshua fight's very interesting. And to be fair, I'd probably take Bakole to beat Daniel Dubois. You know, I'm not sure Daniel Dubois would be able to handle Bakole's size and pressure. You know, we saw him struggling with Jarrell Miller until Miller gassed. And I don't think Bakole would gas against Daniel Dubois. I think he'd come in a lot better shape. And I think he'd probably beat Daniel Dubois, probably by stoppage. But I think the most likely fights for Bakole on the next Saudi Arabia show maybe are probably Ajit Kabayel. He could probably fight Jarrell Miller. Probably Joseph Parker. But the most interesting fight to me is probably Zhilei Zhang. Now, I probably think he would beat Kabayel. I think he would beat Jarrell Miller just because, you know, Jarrell Miller always relies on a size advantage. You know, he wouldn't be very effective if someone was the same size as him. You know, he's always used his physical size and his strength to break these guys down, you know, because he's so much bigger than them. But obviously because Bakole is the same size as him and probably hits harder, you know, he's a lot fresher at this stage of his career. I think he'd probably beat Jarrell Miller up. I think he'd beat him clearly. I think the Joseph Parker fight is interesting. I don't think Joseph Parker looked very good against Zhilei Zhang. I thought, you know, Zhang's a massive puncher, don't get me wrong, but, you know, the 2 left hands that Zhang put Parker down with, I don't think they were really full-blooded shots, full-blooded left hands. You know, they didn't seem to have that much power behind them. And, you know, I think Parker might... I don't really think Zhang tried his hardest to win that fight, if I'm completely honest. I think that might have been like a setup fight for Joseph Parker. I don't really think Zhang gave it his all, unless there was something wrong with Zhang, like medically. He just didn't seem to have any urgency to win that fight. You know, he was barely letting his hands go. You know, just giving away the rounds, all 12 rounds apart from the knockdowns. You know, he was just giving them away. And, you know, he just let Joseph Parker land on him and he wasn't throwing anything back. I just thought it was a really weird performance. You know, he didn't really seem to have any urgency to actually try to win the fight. I think if Zhang would have actually let his hands go, he probably could have got Joseph Parker out of there, because, you know, every shot that landed hurt Parker, every clean shot. So that was a weird performance, to be honest. But I think at this stage, Martin Bakole probably beats Joseph Parker, in my opinion. I'm not sure Joseph Parker has enough to keep him off him. And, you know, I could even see Bakole stopping Joseph Parker. And to me, I think a lot of people are calling for the Zhilei Zhang fight. I think that's very interesting. You know, as I've said, I don't really think Bakole, from a technical point of view, is that good. You know, he gets hit a lot, but he definitely has the style to beat Zhang. You know, I think he could probably do a similar thing to what Filip Hrgović did. You know, just sort of fire on that front foot and try and outwork him. You know, break him down late and win those rounds. But I think he could probably do it more effectively. You know, Zhang, it's well documented that he has stamina issues. In the early rounds, he's very dangerous, but as the fight wears on, he starts to gas a bit more and more. And it's a really like 50-50 fight for me, because obviously with Zhilei Zhang's power, you know, and just his speed and his accuracy, he could knock Bakole out. I think that's definitely a possibility. He could knock him out early. You know, Zhang probably is the hardest out of anyone in the heavyweight division, you know, just based on his size, his speed, his power, his accuracy. But I mean, if Bakole was able to survive the early rounds, and he was able to work Zhang's body, he was able to apply that steady pressure, he was a bit more defensively responsible than he was in this fight. I do see a scenario where he wins the fight. I think it's very interesting though. I definitely want to see that fight. I think I might favour Bakole to win that fight, just based on styles, and I think if he can survive those early rounds, I think he could definitely win the fight late, but on points or maybe a late stoppage. But again, Zhang has a big chance in that fight in the early rounds especially. But yeah, just wanted to make this video because I've been watching Martin Bakole for a while, you know, just waiting for him to get his opportunity. You know, he beat the brakes off Carlos Takam in the fight before this, and, you know, I know Takam's, what is he, 40 years old, something like that. But, I mean, no one does that to Carlos Takam, you know, just knock him out in 4 rounds, you know, demolish him. You know, I mean, you saw Makhmudov. I mean, if it wasn't for the fake knockdown in that fight, I believe it was in the 8th round, where Makhmudov sort of cuffed Takam behind the head, and they called it a knockdown. I think Takam probably could have got a draw or even won that fight, you know, because I think he was winning that round. And, you know, Takam, he's obviously given a lot of guys really tough fights. He beat Tony Oka in the fight before as well. So to, you know, just to blitz him out of there in 4 rounds are really impressive. And I think Martin Bakole can be a top 10, you know, maybe even top 5 heavyweight, just based on his size, his pressure, his strength, his power, his toughness. And, you know, he could sort of be like how Joe Joyce was, or Jarrell Miller, but I think, you know, he's considerably fresher at this stage of his career. He hasn't had any tough fights. And yeah, I think he can be a problem in the heavyweight division. And if he can get a couple of wins under his belt, I hope he can get, you know, a title opportunity. You know, whether it's against Usyk or Fury or AJ, whoever. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and yeah, God bless.